My childhood sweetheart and I were in a car accident. When I regained consciousness, my sweetheart of many years had lost her memory. As for me, I miraculously emerged completely unscathed, but for some reason, the soul of my long-deceased grandmother had taken up residence inside me. As soon as Grandma appeared, she spoke angrily, "This girl is playing the amnesia trick again to fool my dear grandson. If I were still in this world, I'd teach her a lesson." The sudden words left me stunned in an instant, my eyes wide with shock, as round as copper bells. Then, Grandma's voice echoed continuously in my mind, "In a past life, my dear grandson suffered terribly because of Yolanda, enduring several years of dark and miserable days with her. My dear grandson nearly lost his life from a heart attack, and what did she do? She went off to celebrate Lucas's birthday happily. What kind of thing is that? It really infuriates me. Dear grandson, when your grandfather arranges your marriage this time, whatever you do, don't choose Yolanda. You must choose Yvonne, that girl has a good heart." At that moment, Grandpa walked into the hospital room with several elders and placed photos of the heirs from the 4 major families in front of me, asking me to choose one as my wife. Without a moment's hesitation, I immediately chose my archrival, Yvonne. I've always been a child who listens to Grandma. Grandma said Yolanda doesn't love me, so I stopped holding on to any illusions about her. Grandpa looked at me, a hint of hesitation in his eyes, and said slowly, "Cedric, you and this girl have never gotten along. Are you sure you want to choose her as your wife? Think carefully, once the marriage contract is set, there's no turning back." Grandpa is a prominent figure in the archaeology world. He had already set the rule that whichever heir from the 4 major families marries me will secure my family's cooperation. Seeing this, Lin Yuanning's mother also panicked and hurriedly advised me, "Cedric, even though Yolanda has lost her memory and forgotten you, you've always liked her so much. Can't you wait for her a little longer? Maybe after you get married, she'll remember the past." Upon hearing this, Grandma let out a heavy snort, her face full of disdain. "Nonsense. In the past life, that guy Lucas broke my dear grandson's watch, and my grandson didn't even hold it against him. But Yolanda, she actually kicked my grandson out the door. Poor thing, he was wearing pajamas and got drenched in the rain for so long, almost freezing to death. It was Yvonne who came running to hold an umbrella for my grandson and even booked a hotel for him to rest. Although that girl has a sharp tongue, her heart isn't too bad." Listening to Grandma's words, my heart felt as if it were being tightly gripped by an invisible hand, throbbing with pain. I truly couldn't understand why Grandma always brought up the past life. Those seemingly non-existent memories felt so real to me, as if I had personally experienced them. My chest felt as if it were blocked by 1,000 pounds of cotton, suffocating and uncomfortable. Moreover, Lucas was indeed Yolanda's first love, and they shared a deep bond. As for me, I was merely someone who had barged into her life later on. I said firmly to Grandpa, "Grandpa, I've made my choice. It's Yvonne." Grandpa nodded, put away the photos, and gently patted my shoulder. "Good, I respect your choice. In 2 days, I will announce your engagement to Yvonne." Grandma let out a long sigh of relief and said with relief, "That's more like it. This time, my dear grandson is sure to live a good life." Grandpa and the elders went aside to talk, and I changed my clothes, planning to go out for some fresh air. Unexpectedly, standing outside the hospital room door were 3 girls with graceful figures and beautiful faces. All of them were candidates for my marriage selection. Yolanda was among them, but Yvonne was nowhere to be seen. Cece walked towards me with a smile, her eyes full of curiosity. "Cedric, I heard your grandfather is choosing one of us 4 to be your fiancé. Who did you pick?" Wendy teased from the side, "What's there to ask? It must be Yolanda. Everyone in our circle knows you're head over heels in love with her, treating her like a treasure." Yolanda glanced at me indifferently, her tone calm. "I don't remember what happened in the past 3 years. I only remember Lucas is my boyfriend. But I know that during those 3 years of lost memory, we were together. Even though I don't love you now, my father's wishes are hard to defy. Since the engagement is set, I will marry you." My grandmother sneered in my mind, her voice filled with disdain. In her past life, she pretended to lose her memory, openly flirting with Lucas while sucking my dear grandson's blood and seizing our family's wealth. In the end, she drove my dear grandson to depression, illness, and death. What a wicked thing, get lost now. I looked at Yolanda's indifferent expression. If not for Grandma's reminder, I might have truly been deceived by her lies. Once, I loved her so deeply, fully believing that she loved me just as much. I remember 3 years ago, when she set off fireworks across the entire city for me. Her affectionate gaze and sweet words still echo in my mind, "Cedric, I want to marry you. I want to make you the happiest man in the world." Back then, I was moved to tears and began a sweet romance with her. However, I never imagined that she had never forgotten Lucas from the very beginning. She only pretended to love me because she didn't dare offend me. Now, she probably feels the act can't go on any longer, so she's simply pretending to have amnesia, openly expressing her love for Lucas while reluctantly agreeing to marry me, all just to secure a partnership with my family. Nothing in this world comes that easily. I wanted to argue with Yolanda, but seeing how confident she was that I would choose her, I swallowed my words. Let her enjoy these 2 days of triumph. When she hears the truth about the engagement from Grandpa herself, I'll be curious to see the look on her face. Cece, noticing my silence, gently poked my shoulder. "Cedric, did you choose Yolanda?" I calmly replied, "You'll find out in 2 days." With that, I turned and walked toward the door. From behind me, Wendy's voice rang out. "Yolanda, he definitely chose you. Let me tell you, back when you were seriously ill, Cedric searched the world for a cure. When he heard the temple on North Mountain was powerful, he knelt and climbed all 9,900 steps just to pray for your safety. He truly loves you to the core." Yolanda chuckled softly. "Really? I never knew he loved me that much." At that moment, my heart felt as if it had been slashed by a sharp blade, the pain unbearable, but I held back my tears, not letting them fall. I love Yolanda, which has long been no secret in our circle. Everyone mocks me for being a simp, but I never cared. When I was young, my parents passed away early, and my grandparents were constantly on the move due to their archaeological work. I became an easy target for others to bully. Only Yolanda ever protected me, so I've admired her since childhood. When she confessed her feelings to me, I was overjoyed and swore to treat her well for the rest of my life. However, her kindness toward me turned out to be calculated. She never deserved my sincerity. "Cedric, wait a moment." Yolanda's voice came from behind me. I turned around and saw her walking toward me in high heels, her posture proud and arrogant. She stood before me, her gaze cold. "I know you just chose me. I will marry you, but my heart belongs only to Lucas. I hope you can support us and not interfere too much." I stared straight into her eyes and asked, "Didn't you lose your memory? Why are you so sure I would choose you?" Yolanda frowned and said matter-of-factly, "They all say you love me. Who else would you choose besides me?" I smiled bitterly. So she had always known I liked her. But why did she have to trample on my sincerity like this? I took a deep breath and said, "Don't worry, from now on, I won't bother you anymore. I will support you both." And I thought to myself, she would probably be very happy if she knew I chose Yvonne. Yolanda was taken aback by how quickly I agreed. I continued walking toward the main gate when suddenly, a bicycle came rushing toward me. The wheel slammed heavily into my leg, causing me to stumble and fall to the ground. My palms scraped against the pavement, and a sharp, piercing pain instantly spread throughout my body. Lucas's face turned pale with shock. He quickly got off his bicycle and tried to help me up, looking utterly remorseful as he said, "Cedric, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. Please don't be angry with me." Before I could even speak, Grandma's voice erupted in my mind, "That guy is rotten to the core. In our past life, he often bullied my dear grandson, either pretending to be crazy or shifting the blame, and he had Yolanda completely fooled. Neither of them is any good." Yolanda saw Lucas's face flushed with anxiety and felt a pang of heartache, quickly saying, "All right, Lucas, it's just a small matter. With me here, no one dares to blame you." After speaking, she helped Lucas up and shot me a warning look. It was just a bump. You wouldn't make a big deal out of it, would you? My arm had a large patch of skin scraped off, and blood was flowing freely. I gritted my teeth against the pain and stood up. Lucas looked at me with a pitiful expression. Cedric, I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. I'll slap myself as an apology. With that, he raised his hand to hit himself. Yolanda quickly grabbed him and angrily scolded me, Cedric, Lucas didn't do it on purpose. Can't you stop bullying others just because you have the upper hand? Grandma grew even angrier, shouting loudly in my mind, you brainless fool. My dear grandson hasn't said a word, and that guy is just putting on a pitiful act all by himself. How dare he accuse my dear grandson of bullying him? This is infuriating. Dear grandson, don't hold back, slap them. After hearing Grandma's words, I couldn't hold back any longer. I raised my hand and slapped Lucas across the face, then looked coldly at Yolanda. See? This is what it means to bully someone with power. Lucas was stunned by my slap, and Yolanda froze too, a flicker of anger in her eyes. Cedric, you've gone too far. Without mercy, I slapped her as well. This is what going too far looks like. For so many years, I have always doted on her and never had a single argument with her. After those 2 slaps, she was completely stunned. Yolanda stared at me in disbelief, gritting her teeth and saying, fine, very well, but how dare you lay a hand on me? You'll regret this. Lucas, let me take you to get your injuries treated. Grandma sneered in my mind, instead of taking good care of her injured grandson, she goes and worries about another man. It's being with someone so thoughtless that she'll regret. Oh, my poor grandson, you just got hurt, it must be so painful, right? I lowered my head, looking at the blood continuously seeping from my arm. The bitterness and grievance in my heart surged out like a flood breaking through a dam. In the past, whenever I got even the slightest injury, Yolanda would be frantic with worry, wishing she could bear all the pain for me. Perhaps the actions she once showed in loving me were fake, but the affection back then was real. Yet now, she turns a blind eye to my pain, even blaming me, afraid I might make things difficult for the one she loves. Grandma's words felt more and more true to me at this moment. Even if I married her, all that awaited me would be repeating the same mistakes. I found a nurse and asked her to bandage the wound on my hand. At that moment, I noticed many nurses looking in one direction. Following their gaze, I saw through a wall that Lucas and Yolanda were tightly embracing, their eyes filled with ambiguity. Lucas whispered softly, Yolanda, if Cedric finds out that you're pretending to have amnesia just so we can be together openly, he'll be furious. Yolanda gently pinched his cheek and said with a coquettish laugh, so what if he knows? Everyone knows Cedric loves me. Even if I lose my memory, he'll still beg me to marry him. Grandma snorted coldly, wishful thinking. My dear grandson chose Yvonne this time, and he won't beg you to marry him. Humph, just wait until the engagement is announced in a couple of days. Let's see how smug you'll be then. I forced a bitter smile, but there was no trace of amusement on my face. I didn't want to listen any longer, so I picked up my bandaged hand and walked out of the ward. Suddenly, a scream erupted from the crowd, those people have knives, everyone, run. In an instant, the entire hospital descended into chaos. Instinctively, I followed the crowd, but I was still grabbed by a patient causing trouble. He raised a knife and swung it at me. I had just been injured and had no strength left to resist. I noticed Yolanda had spotted the situation, so I shouted loudly, Yolanda, help me. She had studied Muay Thai and was fairly skilled. Yolanda was about to come to my rescue, but Lucas tightly grabbed her hand and pleaded tearfully, Yolanda, I'm scared, please don't leave me. Yolanda hesitated for a moment, and in that instant, my arm was slashed again. The intense pain made me gasp sharply. Grandma was frantic in my mind, exclaiming, oh dear, this hospital dispute was so intense back then, how could my dear grandson run into it today? That wretched Yolanda, pretending to have amnesia isn't the same as actually forgetting. My dear grandson has sacrificed so much for her, and she actually refuses to save him in his time of need. How utterly outrageous. The pain was so overwhelming that I nearly lost consciousness. Gritting my teeth, I shouted at Yolanda, "Yolanda, I beg you, save me, or I'll really die." At that moment, Lucas let out a loud shout as a patient lunged toward them. Without hesitation, Yolanda stepped in front of Lucas, shielding him as they ran away. In that instant, my mind went completely blank. I watched helplessly as she protected the one she loved and walked away, a wave of despair washing over me. I had loved her so deeply, given her everything, yet in a life-or-death moment, she didn't show me even a trace of mercy. Just as I was drowning in despair, the pressure on me suddenly vanished. Yvonne kicked away the patient who had been pinning me down, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me toward the exit. "Let's go," she urged. The hospital was in chaos, but soon, the rioting patients were subdued by the arriving security guards. Still reeling from the shock, I sat on the ground, my gaze vacant and distant. Yvonne handed me a cup of warm water, her gaze carrying a hint of complexity. I didn't notice her emotions, nor did I ask why she was here. I just mechanically said thank you. The incident of getting injured during the medical dispute quickly reached Grandpa's ears. He was furious and demanded an explanation from Yolanda's and Lucas's families. Lucas's parents immediately made him reflect on his actions and sent someone to deliver an apology gift to me. Yolanda's parents were also angry and forced her to come apologize to me. That evening, Yolanda came to my house, threw the health supplements she brought onto the table, and said with a very unpleasant expression, "Cedric, what happened today has nothing to do with Lucas. I was the one who didn't save you. Why did you make him reflect? Are you taking revenge under the guise of justice?" I raised my bandaged arm and said coldly, "See this? Yolanda." Yolanda was taken aback for a moment, then argued, "You're not dead, you're the esteemed young master. If you call out, someone will naturally come to protect you. But Lucas only has me. You saw it too, today he almost got hurt. Can you please not hold such strong animosity toward him? Go and plead with your grandfather to lift his house arrest, or else I'll call off our engagement." Yolanda's tone was very firm, as if she was certain I would compromise. But I was completely disappointed in her and didn't even have the energy to scold her. I simply said calmly, "Security, please see her out." Yolanda was escorted out by several burly security guards. As she left, she angrily exclaimed, "Cedric, you'll regret this." For the rest of the day, she never came to see me again. Grandfather took my marriage very seriously and hosted the largest banquet ever, with all 4 major families in attendance. I walked into the banquet hall wearing a crisp suit and immediately spotted Yolanda standing in the center of the hall, with Lucas beaming brightly beside her. I was utterly astonished, unable to comprehend how Lucas, who was supposed to be grounded, could be here. Grandma sneered coldly, "It must be Yolanda who went to Lucas's house to threaten and coax them. She went to great lengths to get Lucas's parents to let him out. I never saw her treat my grandson so well in her past life, she's rotten to the core." Yolanda glanced at me, then coldly turned her head away. Lucas, on the other hand, smirked smugly at me. People around began to whisper, "Why is Yolanda so cold toward Cedric, and why is she so close to Lucas?" I heard Yvonne also likes Cedric. Could it be that the chosen fiancé is someone else? How could that be? Although Yolanda has lost her memory and only remembers Lucas as her boyfriend, Cedric is deeply devoted to her. Cedric's wife must be Yolanda. Yvonne gave those people a cold glance, and they quickly scurried away in fright. Grandfather beamed with joy as he beckoned me onto the stage, handing me the microphone. "Cedric, today is your engagement banquet. Such an important matter should be announced by you personally." "All right." I took the microphone, feeling a scorching gaze fixed on me. It was Yolanda watching me. I gave her a slight smile, and a flicker of nervousness flashed in Yolanda's eyes. I took a deep breath and said loudly, "Thank you all for coming to my engagement banquet. Here, I formally introduce to everyone my fiancée. My fiancée, Yvonne." As soon as my words fell, the entire room instantly fell silent, as if time had frozen. Wendy looked at me with disbelief and said in surprise, "Cedric, did you say the wrong name? Shouldn't your fiancée be Yolanda? How could it be Yvonne?" Others chimed in one after another, unable to believe that I hadn't chosen Yolanda. I didn't say the wrong name. The fiancée I personally chose is Yvonne. I stepped down from the stage and handed the peace charm symbolizing the family's legacy to Yvonne. Yvonne's expression was somewhat complicated, and her hand hesitated to reach out and take it. My heart immediately tightened, and I asked anxiously, "Are you unwilling?" Yvonne fell silent for a moment, then suddenly smiled. "I am very willing, it is my honor." She took the talisman, carefully placed it in her pocket, and then respectfully bowed to Grandpa. Seeing this, my anxious heart finally settled. The people around were all shrewd individuals. Seeing that the matter was settled, they began to offer insincere congratulations. "Oh, I always thought Cedric and Yvonne were a perfect match, truly made for each other." Grandma snorted disdainfully in my mind, "You were the loudest one just now calling my precious grandson a simp, and now you're trying to flatter him. Talking nonsense will bring you bad karma." Yes, indeed worthy of being the woman Cedric has his eye on. Her elegant demeanor truly sets her apart in a crowd. Grandma sneered coldly, "Humph, I just heard you say Yvonne has a deadpan face and no one wants her, and now you're praising her. How hypocritical, it's annoying to listen to." With every hypocritical remark they made, Grandma fired back in my mind. I couldn't hold it in any longer and burst out laughing. Yvonne furrowed her brows and asked, "What are you laughing at?" For some reason, an urge to tease her welled up inside me, and I deliberately sighed, "Because I'm going to marry you, so I'm very happy." Yvonne was taken aback by my words, and her ears gradually flushed red. Grandma smiled and said, "I never thought this girl could be shy." To be honest, I never expected it either. Yvonne, who is usually sharp-tongued and cold-faced, could have such a shy side. Once, Yolanda's little friend snatched the watch my mother gave me, and I searched everywhere for Yolanda but couldn't find her. I wanted to fight them, but I couldn't win, so I could only hold back my anger until my face turned red. Just then, Yvonne suddenly appeared, grabbed Yolanda's little friend, and snatched the watch back. Overjoyed, I was about to thank her when she sneered, "Useless, Yolanda can't be relied on. Counting on her is worse than counting on yourself." Her icy words were like a bucket of cold water, dousing the flame of gratitude that had just ignited in my heart, and I ran away crying. That's just the kind of person Yvonne is, always saying such harsh things, yet always showing up when I need her most. I used to dislike her, but later, when I mentioned her to my grandmother, she smiled and told me that there is a kind of love called saying one thing but meaning another. At the time, I didn't understand, but now I realize that she had already seen through Yolanda's tricks. She just didn't know how to express it, so she used this way to get my attention. Seeing Yvonne's shy expression, my desire to tease her grew even stronger. I deliberately leaned closer and asked, "Aren't you happy to marry me?" "Of course I'm happy. It's an honor for me. But could you please step back a little? You're too close." Although Yvonne appeared calm on the surface, her bright red ears betrayed her true feelings. I gently pinched her flushed ear, and Yvonne jumped back like a startled kitten. Then, trying to act composed, she said, "I need to use the restroom. Wait here for me." Yvonne hurriedly left. Grandma sighed, if only this girl could always be this shy. Actually, if she didn't say those hurtful things, she'd still be quite likable. I nodded in agreement. When I looked up, my eyes met Yolanda's. She must have seen the interaction between Yvonne and me just now. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with disbelief. Lucas nudged her several times, but she didn't react at all. Grandma sneered, "She's unhappy when chosen, and she's unhappy when not chosen. That's just how people are, they only learn to cherish what they've lost." I ignored Yolanda, exchanged a few pleasantries with the people who came to congratulate me, then picked up my bag and prepared to step outside for some fresh air. Just as I reached the door, someone grabbed my arm. I turned around and saw it was Yolanda, her eyes revealing a hint of unwillingness. Why would it be Yvonne? When did you two get together? Her tone carried a hint of accusation. I mockingly shook off her hand and said coldly, "Please watch your words and actions. My private affairs are none of your business. Who else could my fiancée be if not Yvonne?" Yolanda's lips trembled as she said, "But we were once in love too. Didn't you always love me?" I sneered and looked at her. Didn't you say you lost your memory and only remember Lucas as your boyfriend? You even begged me to let you two be together, didn't you? Yes, it was she herself who begged me to let them be together. So why is she so flustered now, as if she's about to lose something important? Yolanda hesitated for a moment and said slowly, actually, I can still feel that I love you. After all, we once shared such deep feelings. Maybe after we get married and spend more time together, I'll remember the past. Almost at the same time, Grandma cursed angrily in my mind, still lying to my dear grandson at this point, how shameless. I no longer wanted to watch her act, so I laid it all out directly. Yolanda, has anyone ever told you how ridiculous you look, pretending to have amnesia while trying to have it both ways? Yolanda froze, her fingers tightly gripping my sleeve. How did you know? I shook off her hand in disgust and said, I've already let you have your way, Yolanda. Don't bother me again. Yolanda snapped back to reality and realized I had already walked some distance away. She wanted to chase after me but was held back by Lucas grabbing her arm. Gritting her teeth, she shouted at me, Yvonne isn't a good person either. Plenty of people in the circle dislike her. I hope you'll think it over carefully. Without turning my head, I replied, I have my own judgment. Since I chose her, she's worth my love. Yolanda was taken aback and said angrily, marry her, and you'll regret it. Sorry, I won't regret it. Grandma cheered for me in my mind, good grandson, you're becoming more and more promising, just like me back in the day. I took my bag and walked out of the hall, leaning against the railing to enjoy the evening breeze. At some point, Yvonne came to my side, her bright eyes looking at me. Didn't I tell you to wait for me in the hall? Why did you come out here? I looked at her and said with emotion, don't you think this place is a lot like our youth? I was a university classmate with the heirs of the 4 major families. When we had no classes, we always liked to come to the window to catch the breeze. Most of the time, Yolanda and I came together. Sometimes, when Yolanda didn't want to come, I would come alone, and occasionally I would run into Yvonne. When we were young, because Yvonne's words were too hurtful and my attitude toward Yolanda wasn't good either, we would argue as soon as we met. Only when we were enjoying the evening breeze would she quiet down and share this peace with me. Yvonne handed me a can of beer and opened one for herself, taking a few sips. I sensed that she seemed troubled, but I didn't speak first. Yvonne was silent for a moment before finally saying, we've played our part long enough. When do you plan to come clean to everyone? I looked at her in surprise. Come clean about what? I'm serious about marrying you. Yvonne smiled self-deprecatingly, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. You don't have to lie to me. You've always loved Yolanda. I bet you only got engaged to me to provoke her, waiting for the day she changes her mind and comes back to you. Then you'll just abandon me, right? Yvonne's words stirred a pang of guilt in my heart, and I was also a little annoyed by her wild imagination. Just then, I heard Grandma's voice, chuckling as she said, that girl Yvonne, she's just jealous. My anger instantly dissipated. I took her hand and said softly, what if I said I was serious? Yvonne tried to pull her hand back, but I held it tightly. She looked up, her eyes seeming to hide something. Cedric, are you sure there's no trace of Yolanda left in your heart, and you've made up your mind to marry me? I frowned and said, otherwise? Don't you want to marry me? As soon as the words left my mouth, she hugged me tightly. Yvonne buried her head in my chest and said softly, I do. My wedding with Yvonne is scheduled for 1 month from now. Since that incident, our relationship has heated up rapidly. She invited me out for dinner, and I didn't refuse. We hadn't walked far into the mall when we ran into Yolanda and Lucas. As soon as Yolanda saw Yvonne, her brow furrowed. What are you doing here? Yvonne raised an eyebrow and retorted without hesitation, you two can come to the mall, but we newlyweds can't come to nurture our relationship. She emphasized the words newlyweds deliberately, and Yolanda's expression instantly turned sour. He and I have nothing to do with each other, don't talk nonsense. This was the first time Yolanda had denied her relationship with Lucas. Lucas looked aggrieved but didn't dare to voice his anger. At this point, Grandma commented, afraid to face your own heart, a greedy and unsatisfied fellow. I agreed with Grandma's view in my heart. I no longer wanted to deal with Yolanda's matters, I just wanted to live a good life with Yvonne. I ignored Yolanda and took Yvonne into the restaurant. Yvonne ordered many dishes, and when I looked at the menu, I found she had ordered all my favorites. Seeing my surprised expression, she cleared her throat twice. You mentioned them a few times before, so I remembered. I felt a bit moved, recalling that when I was with Yolanda, she could never remember my chili allergy and would always add a lot of chili to the dishes. I told her many times, and she would always apologize with a smile, saying she had a bad memory. Only now did I realize that the one who loved spicy food by her side was Lucas. Love and indifference are truly clear at a glance. Yvonne blushed again under my gaze and quickly changed the subject. There's a new ice cream shop downstairs. I heard it's really good. Do you want to try it? I nodded, and she hurried away like a startled fawn, as if her face would turn completely red if she stayed any longer. Grandma smiled and said, "That girl is quite interesting. It seems my grandson will be blessed in the future." I agreed with Grandma's words. At that moment, Yolanda sat down across from me and anxiously said, "Cedric, there are only 10 days left until your wedding. It's not too late to change your mind. Cancel your engagement with Yvonne and go plead with your grandfather. I'll prepare the dowry and marry you right away." Grandma grumbled in my mind, like a lingering ghost. I looked at her as if she were a stranger. Why should I break off the engagement? Why should I marry you? Yolanda was taken aback by my words. After a moment, she said, "I admit it was my fault for lying to you, and I know you got engaged to Yvonne just to spite me. You've always liked me. If you break off the engagement now, I'll marry you right away." The words, "marry you," were once what I longed to hear most, but ever since she repeatedly put me in danger for Lucas, I've completely lost hope in her. I looked at her coldly. "Whether you're pretending to have amnesia or begging me to let you go, isn't everything you've done just to get rid of me? I heard your family's business has been doing well lately, and you're not short on money or partnerships. Why go through all this trouble to marry me?" Yolanda's eyes flickered, unable to come up with a reason, only feeling an emptiness in her heart without me by her side. I sighed, "I don't care what you think. I'm getting married in 10 days. What's in the past is in the past. Please don't bother me anymore from now on. Please leave." Yolanda sat there, head lowered, unable to speak for a long time, yet unwilling to leave. Just then, Yvonne's teasing voice came through, "Oh, what a rare guest. It's not quite appropriate for you to be chatting with my husband inside while leaving your lover waiting outside, is it?" The atmosphere instantly grew tense. Yolanda sneered coldly, "Don't get too cocky. Cedric and I have a foundation of feelings. Who do you think you are?" Yvonne didn't get angry. Instead, she picked up the teapot and poured tea for her. Feelings may have their order of arrival, but they also have their priorities. I am the most important person in Cedric's heart. Yolanda scoffed, "How can you be so sure you're the most important one? Clearly, I." Ah. Before she could finish her sentence, the tea in Yvonne's hand spilled all over her. Yvonne pretended to be apologetic and said, "Sorry, my hand slipped." Yolanda was angered by her attitude and stood up, knocking over the teapot on the table, splashing tea all over Yvonne. I immediately flew into a rage, pulled Yolanda aside, and shouted, "Are you determined to cause trouble?" Yolanda hurriedly defended herself, "It wasn't me, she didn't hold the teapot steady, I." My heart ached as I looked at Yvonne's scalded arm. I called a waiter for a first aid kit and personally applied medicine to her, not even glancing at Yolanda. Yolanda said aggrievedly, "Cedric, I'm hurt too, look." I raised my head, my face darkening. "Now, get out immediately." Yolanda wanted to argue further, but she was frightened by my expression and could only grit her teeth and leave. After that, the wedding preparations went very smoothly. When Yvonne and I were choosing rings, Grandma told me to pick the biggest and most beautiful diamond ring. While choosing the wedding dress, Grandma kept praising me for being handsome, saying I looked exactly like Grandpa did back in the day. No matter what I did, Grandma was always by my side. I had grown accustomed to this companionship, and it made me feel truly at ease. At the wedding, after Yvonne and I exchanged rings, I heard Grandma's faint sobs. To see this moment in my lifetime, I can die in peace. Many family members came to offer their congratulations outside. Yvonne was about to go greet the guests, but I stopped her. Yvonne, you've already had a long day. Let me handle it. Yvonne wanted to say it wasn't necessary, but I gently pressed her back into her chair. She had no choice but to say, all right, go ahead. There are a lot of cars outside, so be careful. I responded twice and then walked out of the banquet hall. There were many cars outside, and as I stood by the roadside greeting guests, someone suddenly shouted, "Watch out." I turned around and saw a car rushing toward me. I had no time to dodge, fell to the ground, and everything went black. When I woke up again, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. Yvonne was tightly holding my hand, her voice trembling. "I'm just glad you're okay. The doctor said you were lucky, just some scrapes, and you'll be discharged soon. You have to be more careful next time, I was so worried about you." Yvonne hugged me tightly, and I hugged her back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Suddenly, it hit me, Grandma. I quickly opened Yolanda's chat window, where the message still read, "I only recognize Lucas as my boyfriend." If Grandma had seen this, she would have definitely complained non-stop, but now my mind was completely silent. No matter how much I called out, Grandma never appeared again. I understood that Grandma had probably seen that I had found the right person and was completely at ease, so she left. The police intervened in the investigation. After careful scrutiny and tracking, they discovered that the car that hit me was connected to Lucas, and Lucas had a record of renting a car before the incident. All the evidence pointed to him. It was clear that he had intentionally driven into me. He probably saw that Yvonne and I were about to enter into marriage, and Yolanda had also started distancing herself from him because of my attitude. Jealousy and resentment drove him to lose his sanity, leading him to commit such a reckless act. Upon learning of this, Grandpa was furious and used the family's influence to demand an explanation from the Lucas family. Knowing they were in the wrong, Lucas's parents complied, and Lucas was soon taken away by the police, awaiting legal punishment. When Yolanda learned the truth, she completely broke down. She never imagined Lucas would do such a thing. She came to the hospital, looked at me lying in the hospital bed, her eyes filled with guilt and remorse. She wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I looked at her, no longer feeling the love or resentment I once had, and simply said, "What's past is past. I hope you can live well from now on." Yolanda nodded silently, then turned and left. On the third day after Grandma passed away, Grandpa took Yvonne and me to visit her grave. After Yvonne and I finished burning the paper offerings, Grandpa said, "You two go ahead. I want to say a few words to her." Yvonne and I exchanged a glance, then quietly left together. Grandpa gently stroked the name on the tombstone and softly said, "You came to me in a dream 2 days ago, saying that in our previous life, our grandson married the wrong person and lived unhappily. You felt sorry for him, so you used the good deeds you accumulated over a lifetime to grant him a chance at rebirth, allowing him to live a different life. Ah, your thoughts are always so peculiar, and your words sound like something out of a novel. But you meant well, wanting our grandson to be happy. Rest assured, my dear, as long as I am alive, I will protect our grandson. If one day I come to join you, he will have Yvonne by his side, so you can leave in peace." Grandpa said a lot more and finally patted the tombstone. "I'll come see you again next year." 5 years have passed, and Yvonne and I have a lovely daughter. Our relationship remains as strong as ever. What was once a trio visiting the grave has now grown by one new member. Yvonne held our daughter and gently knelt before the tombstone. I smiled and said to Grandma, "Grandma, this is our daughter, Tiny. We hope her life will be as sweet as her name." The baby girl in the swaddling clothes looked around curiously, making Grandpa and Yvonne burst into laughter. Grandpa reached out to hold her. "Let me hold her." Yvonne frowned, turned around, and said, "Grandpa, you've been holding her all this time. Now it's my turn." "Hey, what's wrong with letting me hold her a little longer? Give her to me quickly." I watched them, smiling so much that my eyes narrowed into slits. A little bird not far away circled above our heads for a while, then spread its wings and flew off into the distance.